There is a relatively little-known culprit causing a lot of stomach problems out there, ranging from bloating to nausea to pain to even stomach ulcers. It's completely treatable, even curable in fact, and yet there is about a 50% chance that you have it, and that chance goes up as you get older. It's especially odd that this culprit I'm about to tell you about doesn't get talked about more, given that it also causes stomach cancer in the long term if left untreated. So today I am going over scientific studies on a big, curable cause of a lot of stomach issues. Hey there, I'm Mish, and I am a full-time research scientist with my PhD, and by day I conduct and publish studies of my own, whereas by night I share the results of other studies here to help you reach your weight loss, fitness, health, and nutrition goals. And I'm making this video today thanks to inspiration from some comments I got recently, and a second reason I'm filming this is that a loved one of mine actually dealt with this issue that I'm about to tell you about over the course of several years. So first it caused more bloating and nausea and kind of mild stomach issues, and then that progressed to really bad cramping and tons of pain, both when hungry and after eating. And then he found out he had the issue I'm about to tell you about. He was able to get it treated, and then 2 weeks later, after finding out that he had it, he was totally cured of all these stomach issues. And still 5 years later, he's still totally fine and has not had any recurrence of the stomach issues. So just as a personal life example of how treatable this is and how bad it can get if you don't treat it. And in addition to the symptoms I just listed, two of the biggest signs that you have the culprit I'm about to tell you about are gastritis or peptic ulcers. So these can show up with kind of similar symptoms. Often they involve a burning feeling in the stomach, so burning pain, as well as feeling full really quickly after eating, like after the first few bites, or having a loss of appetite, or feeling nauseous. You don't have to have all of these symptoms. It's just if you have especially multiple of them, then you should definitely get checked for gastritis or ulcers if you haven't already. And in addition to all the symptoms I just talked about, this culprit can cause a lot of different types of stomach issues. So if you have stomach issues that you haven't been able to get a solid diagnosis on, besides the catch-all diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome or IBS, then you should consider getting tested for the thing I'm about to tell you about. So if your diagnosis is IBS, you could still have what I'm about to talk about as the actual cause of your problems. And for one more teaser piece of information before I tell you what this thing is, the culprit I'm about to talk about is a major cause of stomach cancer, as I mentioned, to the point that people who have this thing have a 3 times higher rate of gastric cancer than people who don't have the thing. And that's even worse if you're young. So if you are 29 years old or younger and you have this culprit that I'm about to talk about, then your chance of getting stomach cancer is 9 times higher if you leave it untreated. But thankfully, it is very treatable, and when people do get it treated, their cancer risk goes back down. So it is a very, very strong cause of stomach cancer that you can get rid of if you stay on top of it and go get tested and treated. But one unfortunate or fortunate thing, depending on how you look at it, is often this culprit causes no symptoms. So it's actually in a minority of people that this thing causes bad stomach symptoms, but it does still raise risk of stomach cancer even if you don't have symptoms. But it's really easy to get tested, which I'll tell you more about at the end. So finally, what is this mysterious culprit that I've been talking about? I imagine if you've been tested for it before or have heard of it before, then you've probably been able to identify it by now and hopefully learned something new in this background setup so far. But this culprit is a bacteria called Helicobacter pylori, most commonly referred to as H. pylori. And it is a bacteria that colonizes our stomach, and it causes a lot of inflammation in there, which then damages our stomach lining and then causes issues like gastritis and ulcers and cancer down the line. In the United States, H. pylori is found in about 30% of people under the age of 30, and that prevalence goes up when people get older and they get more exposure opportunities for the bacteria to colonize them, to the point where people who are 55 to 65 years old have a 60% chance of being infected with H. pylori, and most of them don't know it. And overall prevalence rates for the US and Canada and the UK, all looked at separately, all of them have prevalence rates between 35% and 40% of the population being infected with H. pylori. And this varies drastically across different countries. So for example, on the low end, we have countries like Switzerland and New Zealand with 20% prevalence of H. pylori, whereas we have some medium-high countries. For example, Brazil and Ecuador have about a 70% prevalence. And at the high end, for example, we have countries like Nigeria and Portugal with a 90% infection rate of H. pylori. So that means if you look at 10 people in these countries, then 9 of them will have an active H. pylori infection in their stomach. And if you are curious about what the H. pylori infection rates are in your country, then I will put up a table with that information on the blog post where I always put the study links so that you can find the relevant rate for you. So how is H. pylori spread? How do so many people have it? Well, it lives in your stomach, so anything that causes someone's stomach contents to end up outside their body is a potential way to spread H. pylori. And the main transmission route is thought to be within families. So let's say you have a loved one who happens to have H. pylori and they have food poisoning, and anything that comes out of their body at either end could get aerosolized and therefore end up in the air and land on other surfaces around the bathroom as droplets. And then maybe you touch something in the bathroom and then touch your mouth without washing your hands in between. And then that would be one way you could get H. pylori. And this can also happen with just any unsanitary conditions anywhere. So whether it's sharing a public bathroom, well, that's less likely to cause issues, most likely. But especially problematic is if people are not having good hygiene in food service. So if someone has saliva or fecal matter, God forbid, on their hands and then touches your food and then you eat that, you would get it. So it's pretty much the same transmission routes as the stomach flu, largely. And it has also been found to be carried in people's saliva, even when they're not actively throwing up or anything, but it's not yet well known if that is a major way that it's spread. But it does suggest you should be careful who you kiss if you don't want to get H. pylori. And H. pylori has also been found to cause STDs because it can cause infections in other regions besides your stomach. And another proposed way of getting it is potentially from animals, because animals can carry it. For example, it's been found in cattle and sheep, and most notably, I think, for most of our purposes, dogs. So it is theoretically possible that your dog could have H. pylori. It's not that low of a chance with how prevalent H. pylori is. And if you let the dog lick your lips or lick inside your mouth, then that is a very easy way, potentially, to get H. pylori. And there are some case studies about an owner and their dogs, and they all had the same exact strain of H. pylori, so it was proven that H. pylori was spread between people and animals. It wasn't clear which direction, but we do get the same strains of H. pylori as animals do. And another thing that's often talked about as a big way that people pick up H. pylori is by traveling to higher prevalence countries, which are largely South America, Africa, and East Asia. But honestly, pretty much every country is a high-risk country if you ask me, because unless you're in Switzerland or New Zealand, then there's still a pretty huge chunk, almost half of the population who has it, if not more, depending on the specific countries. But of course, anywhere that has higher hygiene standards is going to be a better bet for not getting H. pylori. And interestingly, many doctors won't test for H. pylori, even if you have a ton of the symptoms, unless you've been to one of these high-risk countries, because I just don't think word is spreading fast enough in the medical community about how prevalent H. pylori is these days. So if you are in that boat where your doctor will not test you for H. pylori because you haven't traveled to one of these high-risk countries, then you can actually take matters into your own hands and go directly to the company that the doctors themselves would have ordered your test from. You can just totally bypass the doctor and go order a test, which I feel like most people don't know about, so I thought I would spread this info. I only know of one company that doctors definitely use that also does easily available and widely available tests for this kind of thing, but if you know of other companies, please drop them below. But the only one I know of right now is Quest Diagnostics, which is where my doctors always order my tests from, so it's a big, legit company. And they sell tests directly to consumers, so you can order an H. pylori test and then just go to a Quest business location near you, if you have one near you, and then they'll give you your H. pylori test result, and then if you do have H. pylori, you can then take that to your doctor and hopefully convince them to treat you, and if they won't treat you, then you should find a new doctor. And I think for H. pylori specifically from Quest, the price is somewhere around $100, but it is covered by a lot of insurances, so worth checking if your insurance might cover a private H. pylori test if that's something you're interested in. And the reason I know about Quest specifically is because I was looking into it because I'm thinking of doing that because I have been having burning stomach pain for about a month or so, and I traveled abroad a month ago to a place that does have much higher prevalence of H. pylori than the US. I realized during editing that I need to add this, so apologies for the little jump. It is very important to note that if you are getting an H. pylori test, you need to make sure you are not taking a proton pump inhibitor or bismuth medication during the 2 to 3 weeks prior to your test, because taking proton pump inhibitors or bismuth can mask an H. pylori infection and cause a false negative. So check your medications, make sure they're not a PPI or contain bismuth like Pepto-Bismol if you are going to be getting an H. pylori test soon. So let's say you find out you have H. pylori, you've got your positive test result. What's next? Well, thankfully, we have an extremely effective therapy that is really good at eradicating it that consists of a cocktail of antibiotics and proton pump inhibitors. Now, obviously, taking antibiotics is not fun, but it's definitely more fun than a ton of stomach issues and a really gnarly bacteria colonizing your stomach and getting stomach cancer. So, lesser of two evils in my book, 2-week course or so of antibiotics, and hopefully you will be cleared of it for life because reinfection rates are pretty low once you've had H. pylori eradication from this treatment. So your chances of getting it again in the future are quite low. But as an important note, if you find out that you have H. pylori and you get it treated, you should have all your loved ones who you come into close contact with or live with also get tested for H. pylori, because if you get it eradicated and then you get exposed again from your family member, that's definitely going to increase your chances of getting it again. And of course, you don't want your loved ones to have this stomach cancer causing bacteria in their stomachs, I hope. So to recap, H. pylori is a type of bacteria that colonizes your stomach and causes a ton of problems in there. And over 50% of people worldwide have it. Really depends on your country though. And it massively increases your risk for stomach cancer, especially if you're young and have it. And it causes a ton of different types of stomach problems if you do have it. But unfortunately, or fortunately, a lot of the time you can have H. pylori and have no symptoms. So it could be in there causing problems, raising your cancer risk without you actually knowing you have it. So that's the bad news, but in good news, it's really easy to get tested for it. Just go to your doctor and ask for a test. And if they say no, either switch doctors or go to a private company. And then if you find out you have it, just get the treatment, lasts a couple weeks, and then your stomach issues that are caused by H. pylori should all be solved and your risk of cancer will go right back down. So bad news and then good news. I really hope this can help you. If this ends up helping you, it would absolutely make my day, or perhaps month, more accurately. If you tell me, like if you find out you have it and you get it cured and your stomach problems go away, that would literally make my month. So if that does happen to you, please let me know. And I'd also be interested to hear your experiences with H. pylori if you have had it in the past, like what kinds of symptoms it causes for you and all that. And if you like my videos or find them helpful, then please consider supporting me in making these videos either through the Patreon, which is monthly support, or the GoFundMe, which is one-time support, both of which will be linked in the description below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay up to date on all this science. And if you like this video, please like and share it so that other people can get this information and hopefully solve their mysterious stomach issues if they're having them. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.